Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the Conscious Roundtable, where we're going to be discussing dealing with change and loss, which on the back of our previous 2 videos, you'll notice is quite relevant right now. I'm Luna Starfeather, and as always, I'm joined by my beautiful co-pilots, Sonya and Shanna Maria. And we are honoured to be joined today by Stephanie Stock. Stephanie has over 30 years experience in the field of mental, emotional and spiritual health and wellness. She's a psychodynamic therapist. She's a spiritual teacher, trainer and healer and a psychic medium. And she also happens to be my mum, I'm very proud to say. So welcome, Steph. Lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. I really feel honoured to be invited to join you ladies today. Thank you for inviting me to talk about a subject that I'm really quite passionate about. Loss and change is quite a big deal for me because it's what led me to my healing, and probably for most people, loss inevitably is the catalyst that leads us to maybe change our direction in life. So, as Luna said, it is very topical, loss and change, but I would like to talk first about the grieving aspect of loss and change, because I think that's quite important to look at first. With every change, there is always going to be a loss, and equally with every loss, there is going to be a change. And that might sound a little bit mind-bending, but if you think about it, if you want to change your old bed for a new bed, you have to remove your old bed in order to make space for the new bed. So we always have to have a loss with change, and change will always involve a loss of some kind. And losses can be positive as well. You know, when we're moving on to the next stage of our lives, maybe we're getting married or maybe we're getting our first home. It's a very positive change and very exciting, but we need to also be aware that in the process of gaining something positive and new, we are having to let go of something old. Even if it's not great, it's still a familiarity. It still needs to be acknowledged. Really important. Grief. Some people believe that if you lose a loved one, you live with that grief for the rest of your life. I don't believe that's true. I believe that grief is a process. It's not a state of being. That we need to actually look at the feelings and process those feelings and move through them in order to find some kind of acceptance. Unresolved grief does not go away. And an example of that, I feel, is if, for those of you who were around when Princess Diana died tragically in a car accident, there was an outpouring of grief in the UK like never seen before. And whilst it was tragic on so many levels that this being of light died so young, leaving young children, you know, in the prime of her life, and under such terrible circumstances, the outpouring of grief, I believe, was not just related to her death. I believe it was also tapping into people's unresolved losses that they had buried within, that triggered and brought up their losses. And here was an opportunity to connect with that loss and release the emotion about it with the reason of her death. And that's not to diminish in any way her death, which was inordinately sad, but I think it's something that needs to be noted. There was a psychiatrist who back in the 50s, a guy called Colin Murray Parkes, who I actually had the honour of meeting in the 90s, and he was working with depressed women, and he did some case studies, and bearing in mind the 50s was post Second World War, and he found in every single case, every depressed woman had an unresolved loss in her history. And that is what can happen when you have an unresolved loss. It does have an effect on your emotional and potentially mental health. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's also another psychiatrist, wrote a book called On Death and Dying. And in this book, she cited the 5 stages of grief, which a lot of people will have heard of. And those stages are denial, then anger, then bargaining, then depression, and then finally acceptance. And whilst those are part of the grieving process, as probably most people are aware, emotions do not make sense at all. They don't go in any particular order. So the emotions ebb and flow, as do the stages. So when people say, so what stage are you at with your grieving? It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. It lasts as long as it lasts. It processes as long as it needs to, and it flows as it needs to flow. And when I was working with bereaved people, there were some people I came across who said that they didn't want to process the grief because they were frightened that if they actually released the grief, they would lose their loved one. And they were hanging on to the grief as a way of hanging on to that person who had passed. And I needed to help them to understand that actually, the harder you hold on, the more pain you're holding on to. And actually, by processing the grief and allowing the negative emotions to process and release, you're actually creating a space for them to come back to you and to be able to enjoy their memory with sweetness and with joy, and perhaps a tinge of sadness occasionally, but majorly with joy. And the example I give is like with children. The harder you hold on to children and the tighter you draw them to you, the more they want to run away. But if you let children go, they will come back, they will return because they'll want to. And I feel spiritually, energetically, that when we lose a loved one, I think our loved ones are very sad when we grieve because they're fine. It's us left behind who are struggling. So by processing the grief and giving them the peace as well as ourselves, they can then come back to us with joy and happiness and peace themselves as well as us. So it's very interesting when we talk about grief. Grief energetically is held in our heart chakra, which is in the center of our chest. And interestingly, the heart chakra covers the area of the lungs. So grief is held in the lungs as well. And of course, we are dealing with a pandemic now that is affecting the lungs. So there is a lot of emotion being stirred up, which is, and all the emotions are held in the heart. But also the grief is held in the heart too. So it's really important for us to go within and to look at those emotions, to look at those feelings and process them in order to find some peace. And for those who are grieving for a loved one and are really struggling with it, I would suggest that grief counselling is a great support for those who need it. It's very commonly accepted now, and I think it's a wonderful thing to offer to people, and it's available. So the process of going through grief is first of all to recognize that you are grieving, then to acknowledge the feelings that you may have, and then express them in whichever way, whether it's speaking or screaming or shouting or whatever, crying, whatever it is you do, but releasing them from your body. And then through that, through the releasing, that is when you will make the space for love to enter. Because the grief and the love and the healing is all held in the same place, in the heart. So we need to clear that in order to allow the love to come in. And moving on from the grief of a loved one's passing, this process applies to things too, as well as people. And I've got a list here that I've prepared because we are currently in lockdown in the UK again. And obviously through the year, different countries have been in lockdown at different times. And there has been a lot of loss being sustained by a lot of people. And in my list, amongst the many losses that have been experienced by people, people have lost jobs, people have had to cancel very important events, weddings, big birthdays, engagements, things that people were really excited and looking forward to. They've either had to cancel them, or they've had to reduce them to minimal guests, which is not what they planned at all, which is hugely disappointing. And yes, in the manner of things, when people are dying, it doesn't seem very big, but everybody's hurt is their hurt. We all carry our own feelings. Hugs, for vulnerable people, elderly people, particularly people in hospital, they can't have visitors, they can't have their family members coming to see them. I have an elderly father of 93. I haven't been able to hug him since March because I'm concerned that should something happen to him, I could potentially be the cause. That may not be true, but I'm not prepared to take that risk. So I cannot hug him. And I'm sure there are a lot of elderly people who are not in our bubbles who we can't touch. And touch is so important for us because we express love through touch, through the mouth by kissing, through the arms by hugging, through the hands by touching. It's really important to us. So of course that is going to increase anxiety and fear as well. We're losing our personal space, a lot of us, because if we're locked into our homes, then we are not going to have the opportunity to have the space that we are used to because we're locked in with a family. Independence, we can't just come and go as we please and go where we want and do what we want because we're being told by our governments, no, you can't. Things are closing down. And our whole routine, our whole way of life, everything that's familiar has been lost. And that is something that needs to be acknowledged. It's no good saying, well, we just got to get on with it. Yes, we do. But actually those emotions have got to go somewhere. We don't want them burying themselves deep down. So we need, again, to acknowledge them, make friends with them. I know it's corny, but we do need to connect with them and try and find a way of making peace with them. But on the positive side, when we have processed those emotions, the gains that we have been getting from this situation have also been very, very large, also a very long list, but just some of them. People are much more aware of nutrition because they're hearing about how better nutrition builds up the immune system. And if your immune system is stronger, you're less prone to pick up illnesses. Good health, there's everywhere I look. Joe Wicks is doing a blast, not just in the UK, I think he's all over the world now. There's so many keep fit and exercise classes going on via Zoom because people are at home and they've got the time to do it. So that's going on. People who are working from home are gaining time because they're not traveling to and from work, so they're getting those extra hours. That is a bonus. That is a plus. The kids who had to stay home, this has never happened before in their young lifetimes, and please God, it will never happen again. But they are getting the benefit of being able to spend time with their families, time to play, and this is something that they will carry with them. And yes, there will be negative aspects perhaps to this, but the positives of having this quality time and a break from the routine, a break from schooling, is really special. There's a global togetherness rising because people are reaching out. Thank God we have the technology now. 100 years ago when there was a pandemic, they had nothing. No communication, no radio, no TV, I don't think. There was nothing. Now we've got the TV, we've got the computers, we've got Zoom and FaceTime. We can connect and communicate. As isolated as we may be, we can connect. We're very, very blessed. And also there's a rise in small businesses. People are becoming adaptable and they're flexible and they're changing the way they work. And a lot of therapists, particularly in the well-being field, are starting to work more and more online, spiritually as well as therapeutically. They're understanding that energy does travel. You don't have to physically be with somebody to be able to channel healing. Amazing. And also it's an opportunity with this space to go within. A lot of people have been going within. For some, it's been extremely challenging. For others, it's been eye-opening. So there are positives to change. There are always positives to change. There are negatives and positives. It's the yin and the yang. But we need to acknowledge the losses and process them in order to appreciate the gains. And then once we've done the processing, we will then be able to maintain a positive mindset. And with a positive mindset, we will feel better because our thoughts dictate our feelings. They are interlinked, they go together. And people say, well, how can you maintain a positive mindset? If you've done the work and if you've processed the negative emotions that you're holding and release them, you will be able to move into a positive mindset and maintain it. Or at least if you slip, you can find ways of distracting and then moving back, looking at the emotions, and then moving up the scale, raising the vibration. So globally, spiritually, energetically now, we are moving from the old, the masculine energy that we have been in for 26,000 years. And the masculine energy is all about authority, power, and control. We are moving from that masculine energy into a more feminine energy, a softer energy, an energy of nurturing and caring and giving. And that energy is flexible and adaptable. So for those of us who can move into the feminine energy of adaptability and flexibility and creativity, we're going to ride this wave of change. For those who are stuck in the old energy and are stuck in wanting their control and wanting everything to stay the same and wanting a structure, they are going to struggle. So that's how it is, ladies and gentlemen. We really need to go with the flow right now. And the good news is, if we process our emotions and heal our emotions, we are directly connected with Mother Earth. The heart chakra is connected, the energy of the heart is connected to Mother Earth. So if we do our healing on our heart, we are healing Mother Earth and we are raising the vibration of the planet. So even if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for everyone else. So that's all I have to say, really.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for that wisdom. I'm just curious, I'd love to ask you, if I may, coming back to that list that you were giving about the grieving process, for people who perhaps are not going through a really obvious loss, such as the bereavement of a loved one, where the loss is extremely tangible, but something more general or broad, like just like what we're going through right now, how do they identify that they're grieving in the first place in order to make their way through that process?
Well, I think a good indication would be their state of mind, how they're managing in their life. If they're finding that their emotions are really, if they're struggling emotionally, if everything is upsetting them, if they're feeling overly stressed, if the slightest thing sets them off. I think if the emotions seem out of balance, I think that's a good indication that something is bubbling underneath. Because when we have those sorts of emotions and they're subdued, they will always come out sideways at some time or another. You know, the projection thing of, you know, the man being at work and being shouted at by his boss and then coming home and kicking the dog, you know, it doesn't go nowhere. These feelings go somewhere, but we want them to come out appropriately.
Thank you.
I have a question. So what advice do you have for the people who don't adapt to change very easily, or who may be, or who may not be as open to change?
The problem of holding negative emotions and not releasing them, it's a bit like a boiling kettle with a lid on. If we don't open that lid and let out some of the steam, that kettle is going to explode. Right? So for those who are not used to connecting with emotions, they will They will manage to a degree, and at some point something will give, because the body is the last place to show up that something is wrong. You know, we can cope with mental illness, we can function with mental illness, we can function with emotional illness, we can function with spiritual illness, but if we get a physical illness, it's going to stop us in our tracks. And we just, you know, that's when it's often physical health that stops people, and they have to really pay attention. And what we hope is that they won't have to get to that stage.
That was me. Yeah, that was me. I've had 2 major surgeries in my life because of that, holding all that stress in. So,
but if you don't know, you don't know. That's the problem, you know. And when living in more enlightened times, and we're understanding more and more about this. You know, we've got wonderful scientists, neuroscientists. We've got wonderful Joe Dispenza, who's a neuroscientist. We've got wonderful Greg Braden, who's a scientist. We've got wonderful Bruce Lipton, who's a biologist, who's big in the field of epigenetics. And they're all saying the same thing. You know, they're all understanding about quantum physics and quantum healing. And they've done studies to prove how our thoughts connect with our bodies and connect with our emotions. And they have got absolute proof how important it is to deal with our emotional bodies, because if we don't, it's going to pop up somehow. You can't ignore it. And they've done the studies to prove it. There's a reason why people can heal themselves. There's a reason why a lot of people are constantly sick. You know, think of a hypochondriac, you know, who think they're constantly sick. Guess what? The chances are they will become very sick, because you are what you think. And they've proved it. You know, and there are many stories. Anita Moorjani is a wonderful example of somebody who was literally on her deathbed and had an experience while she was in a coma. And she's written a book about this, and she healed herself. The doctors didn't do anything. She healed herself, and now she's a teacher going around telling her story. Dr. Joe Dispenza, another one, he broke his back. He refused to have operations. And he spent, I think it was 3 months, literally solidly meditating, positive. I mean, he does talks about it, and he healed his back, you know. And the power of the mind is so strong now. It's being measured. Soon we'll be able to see it on machines if we don't already have that technology. I don't know, but it will come. It will absolutely come.
I love that. Thank you so much for bringing up all of these amazing points. I think it's brilliant that we can actually see the energy in motion, and slowly we're traveling dimensions. Everything we're talking about right now, right? We're slowly traveling from the 3D to the 4D to the 5D realms. And in those 5D realms, we understand higher self healing. We understand quantum healing. We understand our thoughts. We become co-creators of our reality. We start to pay attention to every thought we think. And one thing that these amazing neuroscientists say is, if your thoughts can make you sick, well, then your thoughts can make you better. And so it kind of puts you in the passenger seat where you are now directing your life instead of constantly going, well, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? What do I do? What do I do? Where you're literally giving your energy away so much. And then you're at the beck and call of someone else fixing it for you. So I think that's so perfect. I wanted to mention when you were talking about grief, one of my favorite guides and ascended masters from beyond, Rumi, he always says, and this got me through my divorce. And even though it was a really long time ago, but the poem that stuck with me was, don't grieve, whatever you lose comes back to you in another form. So really it's a change of form. It's a transformation. And that if we can hold our thoughts and our energy really high, that we all ebb and flow through these massive, sometimes often catalytic changes. We've all gone through it with our awakening, and look at where we are now, right? It's that process, that window or the eye of the needle where you're going through and you're in the unknown and you have no idea what's going to happen. And so I really feel like that has to do with trust and surrender, trusting our higher self, trusting that everything is perfect as it is, even what's happening globally right now, right? Even with the lockdowns, it's really about just simply tweaking that mindset just a little bit, if you can, and being around positive people, right? Being in community, being in circles, listening to people that have miraculous healings, and everything that you're saying. I think it's just, we are so lucky and blessed to have circles like this where we're having collective conscious talks. It's exactly what we've created here, to have these dialogues where someone can listen and go, oh, planting a seed, right? It is possible. What they're saying, I don't know if I see it yet, but it's possible. So I love that. I love this conversation.
Thank you. I was actually talking to a group yesterday, and I was saying, you know, lockdown may be challenging for some, but actually for us sensitives, to be locked down and away from the drama and away from the craziness that's going on around people who, I call them the muggles, for those who are Harry Potter fans, for those people who aren't understanding a little bit of enlightenment, who don't understand the bigger picture and who just see things very much in 3D. They're running around like headless chickens, just so angry, not understanding what's going on, and only literally seeing what's in front of their eyes and nothing else. And I was saying to the people, you know, for us sensitives, be grateful for lockdown. It gives us a good excuse to stay away from the collective and to cocoon and to work on our own clearing and centering and grounding, and to stay as strong as we can and to stay as high a vibration as we can while this chaos is bubbling around in the collective. So yeah.
And I think it's so important to acknowledge the fact that change is so necessary. Change is such a good thing. It's such an important thing, because change is what brings evolution. It's what brings growth. It's what brings healing. It's what brings movement. It's what moves you forward. And we are constantly changing. I think that old Zen proverb, the only constant is change, right? Like, and it's so true. You know, I think people who are like, I used to be one of them, like terrified of change when I was much younger, terrified of change. Why? Because the idea of change brings a false sense of a loss of control. And of course, control, at the end of the day, what is control? It's an illusion. We have no real control. Let's get real. We have no real control in this life, in this world. We only have the illusion of control, and humans desperately crave control because it gives them a sense of power. It gives them a sense of power in our essentially powerless, apparently powerless lives. And so the idea of change, you know, it terrifies people because it rocks that status quo, you know, and it freaks out the ego that wants everything to stay the same, that needs everything to stay the same. But of course, one thing that I learned that's really been drummed into me this year through my own personal challenges has been, when you embrace the change, when you actually surrender that illusion of control that's not real anyway, when you stop fighting, pushing against the river, and you just surrender that control, that's when you really, truly tap into your real power. And that is when you have the ability to use the change to your advantage and to create whatever you want. That's how I healed my physical body. That's how I've moved forward in every aspect of my life. Surrender. So with change, we can't fight it. We can't fight change. All we can do is embrace it, surrender to it, float on top of it, and enjoy it, because we need it.
I love that. One thing that came up as you were talking about change is I heard somewhere, the more, or control, the more you want to control things, the more things will come into your reality that want to be controlled. So it's
true.
literally like, you know, a full circle. The more you control, the more there will be things that you have no control of, really, essentially. And so it's all about being mindful, you know, and this is why we have all these people online doing yoga classes and meditations and Zoom. And I mean, it's epic. I mean, we are really in a massive awakening process in every sense of the word. I think that this has been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Amen.
Giving us an opportunity. We can either evolve or we can repeat.
Yeah. And if not for change, we don't evolve, we stay stuck. I mean, how many times have we all been in a situation, whether it's illness or a job we hate or a bad relationship or like some dreadful period of stress where we're praying for it to change? Well, that's why we need the change. But yeah, sure, any change, any newness that we can welcome in has to follow a loss. We need to release and let go of the old in order to welcome in the new. And so that's why loss and change are both so necessary. And they're our friends. And if we can befriend them, the process is a lot friendlier, right?
And I also, what I want to talk about even with loss is ultimately what in my own life, what I'm seeing is us loving ourselves through all of it. What is the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is unity and self-love, unity within our own self first, right? Within our merging with our higher self, merging with our own divinity, our own sovereignty, our own pure nature. Through all of the journey, through all of the healing work, through everything, where I stand now is it all comes down to self-love, self-acceptance, and surrendering, allowing, just like the Buddhists, the Zen monks, and everyone say, just be like water, just flow. And until you really understand that, and again, it's a learning lesson, right? We all are going through our own journey, our own trajectory of sickness, illness, divorce, dis-ease, to truly come to what? This understanding that we have no control. Everything is constantly changing. We are evolving. We're here to evolve. And ultimately, we are here to love ourselves.
Yeah.
The end.
And thank God for change, right? Otherwise, we would be who we were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago. And, you know, I don't know about you, but so many of us, I mean, I do know about you, so I'll speak for all of us. So many of us are transforming at the speed of light at the moment, from one week to the next, from one day to the next. We are not the same person that we were. And thank God for that. I'm so grateful I'm not who I was 1 year ago, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Thank God for change.
And it's all because of processing our emotions, the negative emotions that don't serve us, that we hold in our body, that have come to us to help us to learn and develop and grow. By releasing those emotions, we're opening ourselves up to everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Holding that stuff in, holding that stress, holding that trauma, all that is, it's like poison. It's poison.
Yeah, it is liquid poison.
100%.
I think we really have to understand what emotions are, right? Energy and motion. How long are we going to stay in that emotion? It's like one long emotion, right? How do we change that? Well, we choose, we declare, what state am I choosing? Every single moment we declare, okay, and this is the thing, you become the observer of your reality. Number one, you observe it and you go, what state am I choosing now? Where do I want to be? Where do I want to take this? And you learn to change the channel. It could be as simple as that. You change the channel, you put on happy music. You look at happy babies on YouTube. You know, you put on a funny movie, you call a friend, you call someone to uplift you. So it's all about recognizing the emotion and knowing this is not the state I want to choose. I am the creator of my reality. I am strong. I am powerful, and I can choose anything I want. And then you become in harmony with the emotion and the thoughts and all of that stuff. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's where therapy has come so far, because back in the day when I started off, you know, therapy was going every week, digging deep, falling down the hole, swimming around in the bottom of that hole, and then leaving the therapy room and carrying that emotion through the whole week and then going back for more. It wasn't shifting it anywhere. It gives you a sense of understanding, but energetically, you're still holding it. The good news is, with the energy change that came in 2012, the energy shift has made such a difference now, because we don't need to go down that hole anymore. We can stand at the hole and peep in and process and step back, and energetically as well as emotionally move that energy away. You know, 30 years ago, there wasn't so much of that around. It was just the talking therapies. And slowly that's changed. But with the energy shift, there's such a difference. I mean, I noticed in my work such a difference when I combined the spiritual energy medicine with the talking therapy. Perfect combination. You don't have to go wallowing in it anymore. So you're absolutely right. If you've done sufficient work and you can change your mindset, and you can then choose. You can choose whether you want to stay stuck, or whether you want to hang on to the old mindset, or whether actually you want to switch it up. And there's so much out there to choose to help support you in this change.
I love that you talk about that, because going through my own healing journey and working with others, there is an energetic component to healing as well. You know, therapy is a great place to start. It was a great place for me to start many years ago. It gave me awareness and brought that kind of stuff in.
Right.
But there is still something that was missing there. And until years later, I learned about energy work and, that all that spiritual side, holistic side to it. Wow. That's where my transformation really, really just like exploded in the way that I needed. You know, I spent most of my life, and I will always continue spending my life of healing, but my journey was healing. And I just want to seek some kind of peace, some kind of peace within my soul. And I didn't know if it was possible, but I was going to try. And for connecting that, that piece of the energy and that spiritual side was my saving grace in a lot of ways. So thank you for bringing that up.
No, well, I always say, I had it during my training and working life. I had a total of 7 years therapy. And I always say the therapy gave me great understanding of who I was, how I had become who I was, and what needed to change. But I never got my peace. I got understanding and clarity, but never got my peace. And it was when I took a break from the therapy work, from working as a therapist, because I felt something was missing and I didn't know what it was. And I've been beautifully resistant to spirit. They'd been knocking on my door and I'd been looking the other way for so long, and it was time. And I took a break, and I then moved into spiritual development, and then I brought it into my work, and the difference that it made in me, that, it was where I found my peace. And it's the two, both components necessary, but without the energy work to shift that negative energy that comes up, to move it out of your field, it just sits there. It just sits there and it doesn't serve. And now we've got so much more knowledge and understanding of energy and how important it is to shift it. And it's much more general than it ever was. I'm sure it was around in the 90s, but it wasn't open to me. I wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, with the understanding we have now about quantum healing and how it works, it's true. Like, every modality has its value. The talking therapy is so valuable. We need those outlets to release, the burden of the emotions. We need to do the mental processing. We need to bring that relief and that clarity and that awareness to our psyche so that we can understand how we're working. We need to address the ego and the mental programming and the limiting beliefs and the way that our mind is controlling our feelings, our emotions, our physical state. And what we now understand is the need to bring completion to that healing on every layer of our being. So, when I got into quantum healing, I learned about the 15-dimensional anatomy that we have, our spiritual anatomy. We have 15 layers. Who knew? We are currently existing in 15 dimensions all at the same time. And I learned that, in order to bring about permanent healing, we need to address that healing on every level. We can't cut corners. So the emotional, the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and all the etheric layers need that addressing. And that's why the energy work is so important. The spiritual work is so important. But also, the other modalities, the talking therapies, the physical therapies, whatever resonates. There's a plethora of things out there for everybody, because everybody's different and some things don't work for some people. Some people tapping is really effective. For some people, not so much. For some people, hypnotherapy is amazing. For some people, they can't be hypnotized. Some people find the talking therapies on a regular basis really cathartic, and that's good for them because maybe talking and releasing is new for them. For other people, it's their worst nightmare, and so I think it's about figuring out how you operate, how you work, the support that you need, because we're all different and we've all got our own unique situation and way of processing, and finding the right lid for your pot, but then engaging in some deep energetic and spiritual work to really complete that healing on every level, to create that permanent quantum healing, because that's what will shift you forward at the end of the day.
100%. We're all bio-individual. We're all different. What works for one will not work for another. Some people have gotten mass awakenings just from changing their diet, just by changing their nutrition, so I think everyone is it's so perfect, everyone's journey, and so what works for one may not work for another. But I think the beauty behind all of this is keep trying. You're so worth it. You're worthy. Keep on going. Keep trying, and step into what you want to see. So that's the quantum model. That's a new model where it's like, I believe the new model is you can bypass all of these things by stepping into, who do I want to be? Who do I want to emulate? Mom, you said a perfect, something that I'm visualizing is Princess Diana. I want to emulate her. Who is your ideal highest version? For some it could be Mother Teresa. For some it could be and so you can really visualize and put yourself in that state. So if I get angry, well, what would Princess Diana do? If in the moment where you want to scream and shout, or you're angry and your emotions are getting the best of you, you can come back. And this is just a tool that I use where it's like, who do I want to emulate this month, or the highest version? And this is something so small, but you can use it and go, how would she react? Okay, well, then I'm going to use it because it works. You haven't a prime example if you didn't have that as your own mother or your own family or whatever, something that you can step into and create that quantum link and go, I think this can, and sometimes, and for some it will work if they believe it, if they have enough conviction and heart.
I love that. And embrace change. Embrace the change. Welcome it like an invited guest and a welcome friend. Because
and if you can't, you know what to do.
Yeah, because right now we want it, right? We need it. That's what's happening. That's why this is happening right now. The universe, the planet needs to change. And that's why this is going down in the extreme way that it is, this is an extreme catalyst.
And we signed up for it. You know, this is why we're here having these conversations. We knew exactly what we came here to do, how we came to stay anchored, centered, grounded, bringing in the energies of all who help us, from the galactics to the ascended masters to the angels. We knew exactly why, and we know exactly who's helping us. And so amazing. I mean,
yeah, but let's be real. How many times this year have you said, "What was I thinking?"
so thank you so
Those
much.
things still do happen.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, Mum, for joining us and for imparting that beautiful wisdom and knowledge and information. And thank you to everybody for watching. If you like this video, please click like and please subscribe to the Conscious Roundtable. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the next exciting episode. Sending you all so much love.
Thank you.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, please.